The Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 4 versus the iPhone 14 Pro, and a couple of things I didn't expect, actually. The first one being, I didn't expect to be making this video. When I did my longer review of the Z Flip 4, I said it was the de facto comparison video with the iPhone 14, and we talked about it a lot because Samsung themselves, with their marketing campaigns, were being very aggressive in trying to get people to switch from the iPhone to the Z Flip 4. And the second thing I didn't expect was for it to actually work. Almost every day on those older videos, I get comments of people saying they ditched their iPhone finally for a Samsung product, and it was the Z Flip 4 that convinced them to make the switch. So what was it? What can we talk about today that perhaps is in your own mind as you go through your decision-making process? Perhaps it'll aid you. And there were two things that I came up with. Two major points that almost came together in a perfect storm to get people to switch. The first one being the Z Flip 4 itself. And there were a couple of things with it. The first one being the battery life this year on the Z Flip 4. The Z Flip 3, I liked a lot. I used it. 3.5, 4 hours of screen on time was what you got with it. And that's kind of just what you accepted with that device. You understood that going in. You didn't get it as a full-fledged smartphone replacement. You didn't get it as something that would get 7 hours of screen on time that you do everything on, that you'd be gaming all day and watching videos on, all the rest of it. You understood going in that while it didn't necessarily have to be a disconnect device, it was a device that you use sparingly, that you'd have to charge it up. So when you thought about it in context of an iPhone, it wasn't going to replace the casual to mid-moderate user who is going to need that 6 hours of screen on time, who does a lot on their device. I think 6 hours of screen on time is an important metric. I think that's the perfect amount of time for a lot of consumers where they'll feel comfortable. They'll get through their entire day. They won't be on 10%. They won't be sweating battery life, but they can do everything that they want to do and not think about your battery, right? That's what you want. You don't want to be thinking about your battery. You don't want to be sitting there considering, oh, geez, do I have to charge it? Do I have enough to do this turn-by-turn navigation or look at Instagram? You don't want to be thinking about that if you want to go ahead and switch devices totally from something that does that. So I think the improved battery life, now getting 6.5 hours with the improved efficiency of the Snapdragon in this device, was a major, major turning point for a lot of people in feeling comfortable in getting to switch. And the other thing was the form factor itself of the Z Flip. It was never going to be a lateral move. It was never going to be something that, some people do this, okay? Some people go from an iPhone to an S22 or an S21, but you're essentially going sideways. You're trading in something that was like one thing on one end and getting basically the equivalent on the other side. And that, to me, especially going from Apple to Android, I think that's a tougher switch than going the other way around. It's easier to go from Android and get into the Apple ecosystem than it is to get out of the Apple ecosystem once you're in. Whether it's the iMessage stuff, whether it's the different apps that you've bought over the years, whatever it happens to be in there, your photos all in the app there and trying to get them off your iPhone, whatever it happens to be that traps you there, I do think it's harder. So it wasn't going to be just a glass slab that attracted you. The performance-wise was going to be the same, perhaps even a little bit worse on battery life when you're talking about the S22 lineup of phones. So I didn't think that would be enough to really entice people to switch. But something different, something that fundamentally changes the user experience would be, it's interesting, it's new, it's everything that excitement that you got when you first used your first iPhone, when you were coming from that BlackBerry, that Motorola Q, that kind of sense of awe that you got using the device. That's what you get again with the Flip 4. So if you were going to switch from something, it was going to be something like that. Now, before we get to the second point, I just want to say, if I keep showing up in your recommended, because 93% of you are not subscribed, so if I keep showing up in your recommended, please maybe go ahead and consider tussling that subscribe button. These pushins are expensive. All right, the second thing is the iPhone itself. There's been kind of this stagnation with iPhone design for a while now. We're starting to feel it in the fan base. Every year, and I understand, they do make changes. They changed from the iPhone 11 to the iPhone 12. Now, they've kind of carried that design for 3 years now. But even then, it didn't feel that different. It felt like you were getting the same thing. I think the battery life last year, that outsized battery life on the iPhone 13 Pro kind of staved this off for a bit, because it was such an outsized battery, it blew everything else out of the water. All the other competition couldn't even come close to it. So that's something that saved them, because they could really tout that and say, hey, we get significantly better battery life than the competition. So that's something. But even on the software side, the last time that I felt that I was using something fundamentally new and different on the iPhone with iOS was iOS 7. That's a long time ago now. That's a long time to go to feel like you're using the same thing over and over and over again. And sure, they made some changes with iOS 15, and they've tried to push themselves. And I think this is why you're seeing some difficulties with the iPhone ecosystem this year. I think that's why you're seeing some stuff with iOS 16 bug-wise that we're not used to seeing as iPhone users at all. Because they're pushing themselves to add more and more stuff to kind of stave off this boredom that Apple users have. Because they could look at Samsung, they could look at Pixel, they could look at Android and see all these fancy toys that they get with their operating system with Android. And they're saying, well, can we get a little something over here? So I think that the engineers are saying, all right, we're going to try to add this, try to add this, try to add this, and it just doesn't work well or well enough for their usual standard, and that's why you're seeing a couple of these hiccups and bugs. But it needs to be done, and more needs to be done. Even iOS 16, which is a huge swing for them, always on display, all this other stuff, you get the different stuff with the widgets now that you can do, and a few different things with the operating system, isn't enough to fundamentally change that experience. I don't feel like it's something different. I feel like I'm just using iOS again. And like I said, whether it's an aesthetic change, whatever it happens to be, features, the last time was iOS 7 that I felt there was a fundamental departure. So that might be something that just the Apple fan is bored now. They're looking for something different. They're looking outward. They're saying, oh, is there anything interesting out there that's going to be in the relatively same price range with the relative same performance, that's close enough battery life, that does enough for me, that gets me through my day? And I think that's the perfect storm that we talked about. There was a little lackluster on the iPhone side with the iPhone 14 Pro. Not a whole heck of a lot there to entice people and to keep people excited for another year. Dynamic Island is interesting and it's cool, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of innovations there in years to come, but it just wasn't it. Just wasn't something that really kept you going, really just excited you, got you going a little bit, that you felt like you were using something significantly different from what you'd been using in the past. And then you had something that was significantly different than what you were using in the past in the Z Flip 4 that was over there like kind of a shiny beacon saying, hey, I'm over here. You could come play with me and I'm pretty cool and I could get you through your day, and you could get that, not nostalgic feeling, but you could get that awe of having a really cool tech experience again that we've been lacking in smartphones. I think there is something to be said for that. So let me know if you made the switch. Let me know down below what your experience has been. If you're thinking about making the switch, let me know down below what's kind of the hang-up. Is it the durability, which we talked about in the last video that I'll link at the end of this video? I don't think that should be a concern for you. Is it just switching from iOS to Android? It's a big decision. Whatever it happens to be, let me know. Until next time, if you made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time, have that Steve-licious.